Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. Today we're marching into the scorching sands of North Africa to follow the legendary British 8th Army. This wasn't just any army. It was a multinational force, a true desert family, with soldiers from Britain, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, and many other allied nations. Their story is one of resilience, grit, and some of the most pivotal battles of the Second World War. From the brink of defeat to ultimate victory, their campaign against Rommel's formidable Afrika Korps is a true epic. So grab your water canteen because we're about to trace their footsteps through the dust and heat of the Desert War. Our story begins in late 1941 with the 8th Army's first major offensive, Operation Crusader. The goal? To relieve the besieged port of Tobruk in Libya, a thorn in the Axis side for months. The fighting was chaotic and brutal. Picture this: vast, open desert with tank columns clashing like medieval knights, dust clouds choking the air, and the constant threat of ambush. The 8th Army, still learning the unique challenges of desert warfare, initially struggled. They suffered heavy tank losses and were pushed back by Rommel's brilliant, aggressive tactics. It was a brutal learning curve. Yet, despite the setbacks, they refused to break. They regrouped, adapted, and relentlessly pressed the attack. After weeks of seesaw battles, their persistence paid off. They finally broke through, relieved Tobruk, and forced Rommel into a long retreat. Crusader was a messy, hard-won victory, but it proved the 8th Army had the tenacity to go toe-to-toe with the Desert Fox. However, victory in the desert was as shifting as the sands. In early 1942, Rommel, having refitted and reinforced his army, struck back. At the Battle of Gazala, he executed one of his most daring maneuvers, swinging his panzers around the southern flank of the British defensive line. What followed was a disaster for the 8th Army. They were outmaneuvered, their command structure fell into disarray, and their armored forces were defeated in a series of piecemeal engagements. The loss of the fortress of Tobruk, which fell in a single day, was a devastating blow to Allied morale. The 8th Army was forced into a desperate, headlong retreat eastward, all the way back into Egypt. This period became known as the Gazala Gallop. It seemed Rommel was unstoppable, and the Suez Canal itself, the gateway to the Middle East, was now under threat. The 8th Army was at its lowest ebb, its very survival hanging by a thread. With their backs against the wall, the battered 8th Army made its stand at a previously unknown railway halt called El Alamein. This was the last defensible line before Alexandria and the Nile Delta. Here, in July 1942, the First Battle of El Alamein erupted. Under the command of General Claude Auchinleck, the 8th Army fought with desperate courage. It was a battle of attrition. Auchinleck skillfully used his artillery and the terrain to halt the exhausted German and Italian advance. The fighting was relentless, a brutal slugging match under the punishing summer sun. Rommel threw everything he had at the Allied lines, but they held firm. The line bent, but it never broke. By the end of the month, both sides were fought to a standstill, too exhausted to continue. While not a decisive victory, First Alamein was critically important. It stopped Rommel's seemingly invincible advance, buying the Allies precious time to regroup and reinforce for the showdown that was to come. The stalemate wouldn't last. In August 1942, a new commander arrived to take charge of the 8th Army, the energetic and often eccentric Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery. Monty, as he was known, immediately set about transforming the army. He boosted morale, visited the troops on the front lines, and made it clear there would be no more retreat. He famously declared, "We will stand and fight here. If we can't stay here alive, then we will stay here dead." His confidence was infectious. Meanwhile, he meticulously built up an overwhelming superiority in men, tanks, and guns. He wasn't going to fight Rommel's way. He was going to fight his way. He drilled his troops relentlessly for the coming offensive, leaving nothing to chance. This period of intense preparation set the stage for one of the most famous battles in British history. The 8th Army was no longer just surviving, it was preparing to dominate. On the night of October 23, 1942, The desert sky was lit up by the flashes of over 1,000 Allied guns. The Second Battle of El Alamein had begun. This was the moment of truth. Montgomery's plan, codenamed Operation Lightfoot, was a methodical grinding assault designed to smash through the deep Axis minefields and defensive positions. The first few days were a brutal slog. The infantry, including the tough Australians and Highlanders, fought their way through the Devil's Gardens under heavy fire, clearing paths for the armor. The fighting was attritional and costly. Rommel's forces counterattacked furiously, but Montgomery stuck to his plan, refusing to be drawn into a chaotic mobile battle. He systematically wore down the Axis armor and infantry. It was a dogfight, as Monty called it, a test of will and resources. The Eighth Army, with its massive material advantage and renewed fighting spirit, was a force that the depleted Afrika Korps simply could not stop. The turning point came with Operation Supercharge. On November 2nd, Montgomery launched a concentrated armored thrust led by the elite 2nd New Zealand Division. This was the final push, the hammer blow designed to shatter the exhausted Axis defenses. After some of the most intense tank fighting of the entire desert campaign, they broke through. Rommel, realizing his army was on the verge of annihilation, had no choice but to signal a retreat. This time, there would be no coming back. Second El Alamein was a total, decisive victory. As Winston Churchill famously said, "Before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." It was the turning point of the war in North Africa, sending the Axis forces into a final, irreversible retreat across Libya. Following the breakout at El Alamein, the Eighth Army began a relentless pursuit of Rommel's retreating forces. This wasn't a gallop like the one before. It was a methodical, grinding advance of over 2,000 kilometers. The Royal Air Force harassed the retreating columns, while the Army's vanguard snapped at their heels. Rommel conducted a masterful fighting withdrawal, using rear guards and extensive minefields to slow Montgomery's advance. The Eighth Army had to fight its way through several defensive positions, like the Burat Line and the formidable Mareth Line in Tunisia. This final phase of the campaign was a testament to the logisticians, the unsung heroes who supplied the army with fuel, ammunition, and food across vast distances. In Tunisia, the Eighth Army finally linked up with the American and British forces who had landed in Operation Torch. The Axis army was now trapped in a pincer. The end came in May 1943, cornered in northern Tunisia, with the Eighth Army pressing from the east and the Anglo-American forces from the west. The Axis position was hopeless. After a final, concentrated Allied assault, the German and Italian resistance collapsed. The campaign that had started with a retreat to El Alamein ended with a mass surrender. Over 250,000 Axis soldiers were taken prisoner, a victory on par with Stalingrad. The North African campaign was over. The Eighth Army, forged in the fires of defeat at Gazala and tempered in the victory at El Alamein, had proven itself to be one of the finest fighting formations of the war. They had secured the Suez Canal, opened the Mediterranean for Allied shipping, and created the springboard for the invasion of Italy. From the chaos of Operation Crusader to the final triumph in Tunisia, the journey of the Eighth Army was truly remarkable. It was a story of learning from mistakes, of outstanding leadership, and of the incredible endurance of soldiers from across the Commonwealth who fought and won in one of the harshest environments on Earth. They earned their place in history, and their victories changed the course of the Second World War. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the desert sands. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep dives into military history, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'll see you in the next one.